Well, and a fine good day to you, viewers. This is Russ Barkley. I'm back again with another commentary, this time on a subject that I hadn't really planned to cover, but I've received emails recently from several people about RFK Jr.'s position on Adderall and what might happen to people taking Adderall for ADHD now that it looks like President Trump is going to nominate him as the head of Health and Human Services. And the reason that they're so concerned about this is apparently, unbeknownst to me, last summer several articles appeared on the internet from different sources. I'll tell you about them in a moment, that had to do with comments that RFK Jr. made during a Latino town hall, which you can find on YouTube. Now, I'm going to put all of the links to these sources I'm talking about in the description so you can go and look at them all you want to. But to me, what this represents after listening to the town hall is a gross and intentional misrepresentation of the views of RFK Jr. by several legacy media sites. So here is the town hall meeting, the Latino town hall. Like I said, the link is in the description. And where you really want to go to, because it's an hour and a half interview, is down here under the chapters, find the timestamp for criminal justice. That's going to be important. I'll come back to that point in a moment. It's at minute 12 and 49 seconds. Have a listen to what RFK Jr. really said. And now let's take a look at how his views were grossly distorted by two media websites that are now reemerging to cause great concern among people with ADHD being treated with stimulants and specifically Adderall. I think that the misrepresentations began over at Mother Jones. Now, this article appeared July 24th, shortly after the Latino Town Hall had appeared on YouTube, and the author, one Kira Butler, has this to say about what RFK was talking about. Notice the headline here. RFK Jr. wants to send people addicted to antidepressants to government wellness farms. Makes it sound like it's involuntary and it's going to be everybody taking antidepressants. We can go down here further to look at some of her other quotes about RFK Jr., where she says that RFK Jr. unveiled his plan to overhaul addiction treatment programs. Speaking during a live recording of the Latino Capitalist podcast, Kennedy described opioid, antidepressant, and ADHD addicts receiving treatment on tech-free wellness farms, where they would spend as much as 3 or 4 years growing organic produce. Oh my God, makes it sound like everybody on these drugs is going to be forced into these low-tech wellness farms, and they're going to have to stay there for 3 to 4 years. Notice nowhere in here do they mention the fact that Kennedy was discussing prison reform and what to do with victimless criminals who were largely drug addicts in prison, and what alternatives, what more humane treatments could we use for these people to get them out of prison. I'll come back to that point in a moment because you'll notice that the context here is grossly misrepresented. Okay, so that's over at Mother Jones. You can read that article if you want to. I think you shouldn't bother because it's not very well done. But let's have a look at a day later, on July 25th, Neoscope at the website futurism.com, and this was also picked up at Yahoo News, writes the following headline: RFK Jr. says he'll send people taking Adderall to labor camps. He's calling it a wellness farm. And this particular author, who is Sharon, I think it's Adderall as I read it here, pardon me if I'm mispronouncing it, but she says, RFK Jr. says, I'm going to create these wellness farms where they can go to get off illegal drugs, off of opiates, but also illegal drugs and other psychiatric drugs if they want to get off SSRIs or off of benzos or to get off of Adderall and to spend as much time as they need 3 to 4 years. Even this doesn't do justice to the real statement that he made, because obviously that's not the intent. The intent of these articles isn't to represent the facts, the truth, the context. It's to misrepresent them against a candidate that these websites don't happen to like. Now, all of this would have been forgotten once RFK Jr. withdrew his presidential nomination, or to run for president as a candidate, but it came back again now that he may be reappointed as head of the Health and Human Services Administration here in the U.S. So have a look at what he really did say, then take a look at these two articles to see how, in my opinion, they grossly misrepresented what he has to say. But let me make a few key points with a PowerPoint presentation here. And as you can see, I've labeled it RFK Jr., Adderall, and ADHD, how the legacy media grossly misrepresents the facts. So what was Kennedy actually discussing in this segment of the town hall where he talks about reforming the criminal justice system? First of all, remember, this is 6 months ago. He was a presidential candidate. He appeared for an interview. He was asked what he would do about prison reform, given that there is an overrepresentation of minorities, including Latinos, now in prison. So he wasn't talking about taking people with ADHD over to these wellness farms. He doesn't even mention the terms ADHD or depression. He proposed providing more humane alternatives to prison for people who were convicted of victimless crimes, such as drug abuse and addiction. I think that's a very reasonable approach to take here to prison reform. He then proposes that as part of the reforms, they would replace prisons in the rural areas with wellness treatment centers for addicts where they could go voluntarily, as he says, if they want to, for treatment of their addictions. Notice how the media at both sites describe these as being similar to labor camps and implies that attendance would not be voluntary. Nowhere do they talk about the voluntary nature of this, or that it's an alternative to prison, and that it's to help addicts who want to get off their drugs. Of course, that would not serve their purpose, would it? He listed a variety of drugs that people may be addicted to and why they are in prison, such as fentanyl, crack cocaine, powdered cocaine, and opioids. Those are the real big killers in this country. He says that even if they're not in prison, they could also go to these treatment centers to get off of Adderall or antidepressants, and I quote, if they wanted to. But he never once mentions ADHD or depression or people who are being legally treated with these medications and don't want to get off of them. Notice how the media overlooked those key points. So here's how the media misrepresented this story and how they have done it repeatedly with other stories concerning people they don't like. Now, I'm not a big fan of RFK Jr. either, but that's not the point, is it? The point is, can you tell us the facts and the truth, or are you going to spin them so badly and so grossly misrepresent them that they actually don't represent the opinions of the person you're attacking? So what did these media outlets do? There was little or no discussion concerning the context in which these remarks were made. Notice, neither article mentions prison reforms, the overrepresentation of minorities, and how we should be addressing that in prison reform. Nope, that would not serve their purpose. That would sound way too humane. So we can't mention that. They also fail to cite keywords and phrases that are in the actual interview, which, by the way, goes on for a good 15 to 20 minutes. Such phrases as victimless crimes, addictions, that attendance is voluntary, note the phrase, if they want to, that people on psychiatric drugs who want to get off of them would also be able to attend these treatment centers voluntarily. Oh, that doesn't get mentioned either. Notice the insertion of things about the person that they never mentioned. So Kennedy never mentions people with ADHD. He never mentions people with depression. He talks about the drugs that may be used to treat them and that some people may be addicted to or dependent on them and may want to go and voluntarily get treatment to get off of them if they want to. And nowhere in the interview is it mentioned that these people would be, in labor camps. Right? He uses the phrase that these would be wellness farms and treatment centers. It's the writers of these articles that retranslated that into the more offensive and heinous labor camps, as if we're talking about the former Soviet Union or the former Chinese Communist Party back under Mao. And then notice how they insert insults about the character of the individual, referring to him as a cockamamie idea, that he has batshit views, that he's a crunchy granola tinfoil hat wearer. All of this, of course, intended to bias the reader into their point of view that RFK Jr. is some kind of reprehensible individual. So all of that is to say, please don't be worried about the treatment of ADHD with ADHD medications. I have heard nothing about RFK talking about forcing people on those medications to come off of them and to have to go to these labor camps to get treatment. So the articles that are circulating that are causing so much fear and worry are gross misrepresentations of the facts. So I don't think we have anything to worry about here. If RFK does finally get approved and appointed to the Health and Human Services Department here in the U.S., I haven't heard him say anything about people being treated voluntarily with psychiatric drugs being forced to come off of them. So you can go ahead and look at the video of the Latino town hall. You can go back and look at those two articles to see what I mean about how they distorted the context and the interview. But in closing, let me say, folks, I don't think we have anything to worry about with RFK Jr.'s appointment, at least not that I have seen as of yet. So thanks for tuning in. I hope you appreciate this video, and please tune in for other videos next week. As always, I conclude my videos with the phrase, be well, live well, and take care. Thanks, everybody.